I'm the artsy anarchist. Let's talk about art and culture. Well, if women really are equal to men, why have there never been any great women artists or composers or mathematicians or philosophers, or so few of the same? The American author and art historian Linda Nochlin recalls a party conversation in which she, as an art expert, was confronted with the question, why have there never been any great women artists? The article we are going to talk about is a product of the author's reflection of this question. The fact, dear sisters, is that there are no women equivalents for Michelangelo or Rembrandt, Delacroix or Cézanne, Picasso or Matisse, or even, in very recent times, for de Kooning or Warhol, any more than there are Black American equivalents for the same. Okay, this is a text from 1971. In a more recent interview, the author said that a lot has changed since then. The cultural landscape is much more diverse than in earlier decades. Official institutions started to research and recognize the achievements of women and members of marginalized groups. Yeah, that's true. If that's the case, how is Nochlin's article still relevant? Why is this text still worth reading? Give me a moment and I will explain. The miracle is, in fact, that given the overwhelming odds against women or blacks, that so many of both have managed to achieve so much sheer excellence. Yeah, but those arguments are true at the same time. How is that possible? We need to differentiate between accomplished artists and geniuses. Of course, there are women, people of color, people with disabilities, and other marginalized individuals who show talent in specific areas and receive recognition for it. There's a whole list of women artists who have sold their artwork for over $1 million. There are successful women artists, and there have always been talented women, but no geniuses assigned female at birth. Do you disagree? Name one female equivalent to Michelangelo or Picasso and find 5 random people who agree with your assessment of her as a genius. Who is allowed to be considered an artistic or scientific genius in the cultural mainstream? I'm not referring to academic discussions. My arguments come from a non-academic pop cultural point of view. From this perspective, I claim that despite all the liberation and equality women and marginalized people have achieved, they are still not allowed to be recognized as geniuses. It seems impossible for them, no matter how talented or successful they may be. There have been no women geniuses in the past or present. Why is that so? The fault, dear brothers, lies not in our stars, our hormones, our menstrual cycles, or our empty internal spaces, but in our institutions and our education. The term education in this context means the whole process of socialization throughout life. The fact that there are no women geniuses is a result of socialization, education, and often internalized patriarchal and colonial norms. Before I continue, let's specify the terms we are working with. What's a genius? The Cambridge Dictionary says very great and rare natural ability or skills, especially in a particular area such as science or art, or a person who has this. The Merriam-Webster Dictionary puts it like that: a person endowed with extraordinary mental superiority, especially a person with a very high IQ. Yeah, these definitions don't quite cut it. They are just a symptom of a bigger problem. Our ideas about what a genius actually is are pretty flawed. I want to contrast these dictionary definitions with a quote from Nochlin's article. She points out a common misunderstanding about what it means to be an artist and how art is made, and it's still super relevant today. The naive idea that art is the direct personal expression of individual emotional experience, a translation of personal life into visual terms. Art is almost never that. Great art never is. Nochlin defines the process of art production like this. The making of art involves a self-consistent language of form, more or less dependent upon or free from given temporarily defined conventions, schemata or systems of notation, which have to be learned or worked out either through teaching, apprenticeship, or a long period of individual experimentation. Now it's time to introduce a writer who expressed the misconception and inequality we are talking about as early as 1949. To tell the truth, one is not born a genius, one becomes a genius, and the feminine situation has, up to the present, rendered this becoming practically impossible. The Second Sex by French author Simone de Beauvoir was groundbreaking and became a foundational text in feminist philosophy. It sparked discussions about gender roles and the constructs of femininity and masculinity that are still going on. Beauvoir's assertion that one becomes rather than is born a genius from 1949 corresponds with Nochlin's statement, "The fault lies not in our stars, our hormones, our menstrual cycles, or our empty internal spaces, but in our institutions and our education," a text from 1971. And in 2025, the discussions about the constructs of femininity and masculinity and the construct of genius, sparked about 75 years before, are still going on and are becoming increasingly heated. Here's what Nochlin says about the myth of the genius. The apparently miraculous, non-determined and asocial nature of artistic achievement, this semi-religious conception of the artist's role, is elevated to a hagiography in the 19th century, when both art historians, critics, and not least some of the artists themselves tended to elevate the making of art into a substitute religion. We still love the myth of the lonely genius and are ready to ignore anything that might spoil our romantic ideal. It's not very glamorous to think about all the resources, support, opportunities, and luck it actually took to seem that lonely and genius. Here's an example from my German school days. I still clearly remember hearing this short anecdote about the author Thomas Mann for the first time. During this time, he was not disturbed. It was the last sentence that didn't sit well with me. Thomas Mann was the father of 6 kids. Do I really have to explain my problem with idolizing Thomas Mann's work ethic? Don't get me wrong. Even in a privileged situation, you still have to do the work. You still need some talent. I truly appreciate Thomas Mann's literary work, but even with loads of talent and a strict work ethic, how could someone achieve greatness without having an untouchable room of their own, both in the house and in the minds of all family members? My point with this anecdote is that it was told by a modern, liberal, middle-aged female teacher to a class of 16 years olds, without any irony or at least some context. The example might be not the newest one, but the idolization of the genius is definitely still in fashion. There is something fundamentally off about how we generally think of genius. Picture genius in your mind. I'm not sure what you are imagining, but I bet if this were a movie scene, it'd be a white guy with some rare, extraordinary talent completely detached from everyday life and mediocrity. When we celebrate scientific discoveries or artistic achievements, we tend to imagine lone geniuses pulling off incredible feats out of nowhere, against all odds relying solely on their own intellect and creativity. The dictionary defines a genius as someone with extraordinary mental superiority, so naturally all their artistic or scientific work is seen as a product of this unique brilliance. In popular belief, being a genius is a pretty lonely gig.
I was born to be free.
These ideas miss the mark on so many levels. Almost everything is, in some way, a collective achievement that happens within a context. Take specific breakthroughs, for example. Most of the time, they are just the tip of the iceberg after hundreds or even thousands of scientists have spent decades researching the same field. Then, usually one person or a small team gets the credit for their exceptional minds and work. All you need to succeed is talent and hard work. That's what I grew up believing, the classic promise of meritocracy. But over time, I realized that's mostly not true. It's actually a pretty dangerous myth. Socioeconomic resources and opportunities always play a huge role in the equation of success in general and in becoming a genius in particular. So let's wrap up our discussion about the mainstream idea of genius by diving into the golden nugget theory of genius. Nochlin demonstrates how the lack of genius in women is explained with a syllogism. The notion of the great artist is primary, and the social and institutional structures within which he lived and worked as mere secondary influences or background lurks the golden nugget theory of genius and the free enterprise conception of individual achievement. On this basis, women's lack of major achievement in art may be formulated as a syllogism. If women had the golden nugget of artistic genius, then it would reveal itself. But it has never revealed itself. Quod erat demonstrandum, women do not have the golden nugget of artistic genius. We need to recognize that no one is born a genius is made. And the process of becoming a genius, whether as an artist or scientist, is shaped by many factors. The golden nugget theory of genius conveniently reinforces patriarchal stereotypes about women and marginalized groups. We still risk falling into the same old misunderstandings about what genius really is. To be clear, I'm not talking only about people who are read as female, but about anyone who isn't born into material and social privilege, or who exists with characteristics seen as different and therefore inferior according to dominant patriarchal, colonial and capitalist norms. In 2025, my argument is that there still isn't enough space in our collective mindset or lived experiences for women, people of color, indigenous peoples, or other marginalized groups to be recognized as geniuses, especially without exceptional socioeconomic resources.